Hello, greetings. So I thought it was time for another Gorean topic. This topic was inspired by a discussion I had with a so-called Kachira yesterday. And while most of what she said was rude, one of the things she tossed at me is something I thought I would discuss. She made fun of the fact that I bring, for example, the ancient Romans and the Viking culture and so on into Gorean discussions. So I thought I would discuss this a bit, because I think that there's a lot of people that forget to do this, that forget that the Gorean philosophy was not made in a vacuum, that it was not something that John Norman reached into his anus and pulled out and presented. It is a philosophy that is basically a patchwork of a lot of older and actually current philosophies. And learning about these other ways of thinking is a good way to understand the Gorean philosophy better. Because what you have to remember is that the Gore books, above everything else, they're stories, they are novels. So that there will be a lot of things that the characters do that doesn't really fit with the philosophy. One giant example for it is how everybody is basically slaves to the priest kings, and which is pretty un-Gorean actually. So to really understand the philosophy, it helps to have a background in the various philosophies, mindsets, political directions, and so on, that Norman got his inspiration from. This is because, let's say, it's the same as, let's say, for example, you want to study the occultist Aleister Crowley. We know that he was hugely inspired by, I think it was it was somewhere middle of the 1740, 1750, around there he was most active. French occultist named Eliphas Levi. We know that Crowley was extremely inspired by him. So reading Levi's work actually helps enormously in understanding Crowley. It's the same way with the Gorean philosophy, that if you know quite a bit about Greek Roman culture, Nietzsche, and so on and so forth, understanding the philosophy is easier, and it's also easier to look at the books and then separate out what is just there for the fiction and what is there as part of the philosophy. It helps you take this series of science fiction books and make a coherent, functional philosophy that works in our day and age. Now, the problem is that a lot of people, they come into Gore with one of two mindset. One is slave. We don't care anything about the philosophy. We just hear, oh, women are enslaved, men are the masters, oh, and there's slave possessions. Slave. And they're not interested in anything else. It's basically, and that's BDSM with just some words and ideas from these books. Now, by all means, if that's what enriches your life, go for it. But it is not what some people will call Goreanism, basically living by the philosophy. That is basically taking the slavery aspect and doing it's just like, I know a couple that was so inspired by in a series of fantasy books called Wheel of Time, you have a culture there that enslaves mages. And there's some people I know that were so inspired by that slavery that they decided to shape their BDSM relationship around it. That's exactly the same thing you do when you go into the Gorean lifestyle with just slave on your mind. And when you do that, it's very easy to forget that there even is a philosophy. So that's one unfortunate mindset that a lot of people have. Well, unfortunate. If that's exactly what you want, then by all means, but you have to remember that there is more to it. It's not unfortunate in and of itself that people have that mindset. What's unfortunate is when then they attack people that see more in it. Other unfortunate mindset is those that only see, oh, men are superior, women obey them. Oh, that means I can be as weak as I want. I have a penis. I rule. Yeah, no, it doesn't work quite like that. So for the rest of you that actually wants to study the philosophy, actually getting a bit into the background is a good idea. So which philosophies is there a point to study? Well, the various philosophies of European and African antiquity. Now, for example, I would say the Greek and Roman one is more important than the Egyptian one. There is good points in the Egyptian one too, but if you look at ancient history, the nations that we usually see as antiquity, the Greek Roman world and also the Egyptian one, Egyptians had a very different way of looking at things than the Greeks and the Romans, which were very similar. So the Greek Roman philosophy, I would go definitely for that. Old Norse, definitely a good one to read up on. I mean, most ancient cultures really, but those two is a good place to start. And I mean, what I'm saying is by no means the definitive list. There are other sources too, but these are basically the main ones. Of current societies that you might be interested in studying up on are most of the various Native American tribes, and especially their history. Also the history of the Samic people are good places to go, because Norman was inspired by those. As for philosophers, I would say that first and foremost, it was Nietzsche that inspired Norman. I mean, if I have to describe the Gorean lifestyle very, very simply, it would be that if you take one part ancient Rome, one part Nietzsche, and one part modern primitivism, and you just mix this together, you have the Gorean. Then if you live that, you might as well call yourself Gorean, because while you might not use exactly the same terms and such, you will be living the same thing. So yeah, definitely read Nietzsche. Ayn Rand's objectivism is also something that's inspired Norman a lot. And from that to the political sister of it, basically libertarianism, not liberals as in the far left, but libertarianism. I can't talk today. Libertarians, which basically is a political system which basically emphasizes personal choice and also personal responsibility. So I will definitely go for those, because all of these are things that deeply inspired Norman. And getting familiar with these mindsets, these ideas, helps a lot in looking at the Gore books, looking past all the slavery, and actually seeing the philosophy under it. Does that mean that you have to own 500 books and use all your time for study? No, but reading a bit about it now and then is a good idea. And generally speaking, when you look at these things, you see common threads. But at the same time, it's important to remember that no, Norman didn't take everything from all of these systems. There's lots of things there that doesn't fit with the Gorean philosophy as well. He took a bit here and a bit there and then boiled it together. However, the Gorean philosophy does not exist in a complete vacuum. And that's extremely important to remember. Also, I think that, well, many of these has been published. Some have been published later and some have been published earlier, but that isn't directly inspired Norman, as far as we know, but that has similar ideas, can often be a good idea to read or watch because it can give you some of those aha moments that helps you understand things. For example, for me, and I'm going to bring this book up again, the Wheel of Time series. I seem to be talking about that a lot. Anyway, I were reading the prequel book there, and there was one section there that really helped me, for example, understand honor in a Gorean sense. Not that these books have anything to do with one another, but because this was a concept I've been struggling with understanding, and suddenly then it was made very clear for me. Basically, it's the section is that there is a war going on. And you have 3 armies involved. 2 of them are allied. And then you have a huge army that's just trying to invade. And basically, Army 1, where our heroes are, they don't really trust their allies. But anyway, they're trying to do a maneuver that involves the other army basically swarming around and chasing the enemy towards a small pass, and then the army that will go, army number 1, stands there ready to take him out. But of course, if that other army doesn't do their job, army number 1 are screwed. So anyway, the main characters in that section, at least, as advisor says, but we don't trust these people. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't be there. And then the main character say, but we've given our words. It doesn't. I don't know if we can trust them or not, but we have given our words. If we are not there, they die when they do this. And we have given our words, and if we die in this sentence, we die with honor. The way I really understood it then is that basically honor within these terms is based on very much practicality. Because it's basic, like the rest of the Gorean philosophy, is very much a practical idea. And by seeing this concept of honor applied in a completely unrelated area, helped me get it where I was completely stuck before. It's basically about being dependable. Basically, it's about being true to your own ideals, and B, being dependable. That's what the whole concept of honor is. It's why it has been a more regular thing among men than women, because way back in the day when you were hunting mammoths, you needed to be able to trust that your fellow caveman actually did his job when you were out hunting together. Therefore, you needed that thing, and so the concepts of honor was based. And by forming those bonds and being honorable, the little frail human beings managed to take out huge mammoths and bring home the bacon, as it were. While for women, while it's definitely also an important concept for women, it was less important because by women's roles, even if they didn't necessarily trust one another or couldn't depend on one another, as long as they could depend on the men, they were sort of okay. So, and this, of course, is very off topic, really can't talk today, but it gives basically that it opens your eyes, because in many ways the Gore books becomes a key. a key that you can use to see these ideas reflected in all sorts of things. I mean, I have watched anime and seen, oh, that's a really Gorean topic, and by then watching that episode again and reflecting on it, I get a greater understanding of how to be Gorean, because this completely unrelated thing opens my eyes where I have been stuck before, because it acts as a key. A key by, I guess that I should explain what I mean by that for those that are not occultists. A key within the occult is something that helps you. For example, the Kabbalion is a key. It helps you, among other things, see this concept of as above, so below. And when you have read that and reflected on it, you can see this concept reflected in all sorts of things, fiction, non-fiction, everything. And therefore, you can learn from these things. And while the Gore books, if you read them and open your eyes, you can see these concepts in so many things. Because here's the thing, a lot of people that criticize the Gorean philosophy, but also quite a lot the Goreans don't get. It is not a fictional philosophy that we have then decided, oh well, we might as well live by that. It's an actual real life philosophy that there are versions of in all sorts of different things. There is just one flavor of that we have accepted. And reading about these things, reading books where you have about honor, reading books about relations of men and women, reading books about taking individual responsibility, all of these things helps you understand the Gorean philosophy. And especially important is the things that inspired the Gorean philosophy, the historical and philosophical ideas that inspired it. So, yeah, that's why I address Romans and Vikings and so on and so forth when I discuss the Gorean philosophy, because it is relevant. It is part of it. Because the Gorean philosophy didn't manifest in a vacuum. It is a continuation of lots of older philosophies that's probably as old as humanity. You can say that in a way, Goreanism have is similar to Wicca in one way, in that it's a way of life, a way of looking at things, that while it itself is new, the concepts and ideas and morality and philosophy it conveys is as old as time. And this present form is just its current incarnation. There have been other incarnations of it before, and one day when there's none left that remembers the Gorean philosophy or these somewhat trashy science fiction books, there will be new philosophies that has basically the same ideas, because the ideas themselves is timeless. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Have a great day and be well.